Thank you, Eric. Carly Fiorina building on her post-debate momentum this week, jumping to second place in this latest CNN poll. We want to show you these numbers. With 15% support, that follows frontrunner Donald Trump is now at 24% and ahead of Ben Carson in third place at 14%. Now, Marco Rubio taking fourth with 11% and Jeb Bush rounding out the top five at 9%. Look at Scott Walker completely facing an all-out collapse, washout, joining four other candidates with less than 1% for Scott Walker. What does this mean for the state of play going forward? We want to bring in our panel on these new numbers, which are just crossing the wires right now. Ed Rollins is former principal White House advisor to President Reagan. He's been a longtime strategist in business and political leaders, and he is also a Fox News political analyst. Julie Roginski is former political advisor to New Jersey Senator Frank Lautenberg, and Steve Moore, a distinguished visiting fellow at the Heritage Foundation. All three are Fox News contributors. Good to see you all. Thank you so much for joining. You know, I think it's really interesting not just to look at who's moving up, but who's moving down. Trump went from in the 30% to down to 24%. Ed Rollins, your thoughts on these new poll numbers?
My thoughts are that this is about salesmen. The three people who are in the front runners are outsiders. Trump and Fiona are both extraordinary salesmen. We thought this was going to be the year of the governors. We had extraordinary governors. The first governor to drop out is the most elder was Perry. The others are not doing well, except for Bush. Bush is still in the game more because of, I think, his family than anything else. And the outsiders now make up over 50% of the polls. And what's going to happen there? Carson's a nice man. He's not going to be a viable candidate. Carly will be tested now. She basically didn't do well in a Senate race in California, but she certainly has a great ability to communicate, and I think people are going to look at her hard, look at her record hard. And Trump, basically, if Trump holds 25% of the base that he still has, in spite of the worst performance on the show the other night, he's still going to be a player in this game.
Now, you think it was the worst performance we've seen yet from Trump on the debate?
It showed he had no substance, and I think that's what most of us that know him well. We know he's a great salesman. He sells himself well, but there's no substance.
Yeah, Julie, that's the thing. We've got to start hearing substance about real solutions to the issues that this country faces. Otherwise, they are going to lose support.
Yeah, and Fiorina did a very good example of exposing Trump. She was the first and the only one to really lay a glove on him in all these months. I mean, when she said everybody on the stage obviously knows who General Soleimani is, that was a direct slap at him for not knowing what the Quds forces were and confusing it with the Kurds. So Fiorina did something that I think was very important for her, but also important for the Republican Party. She went in there with substantive answers to some of the issues that were discussed. Trump looked less substantive than usual in comparison to her. They both have this newcomer business background that obviously appeals to the Republican base, but she seemed to be selling the substance a lot more. And I think as we're getting closer to New Hampshire, closer to Iowa, voters have got to start looking at what those candidates are going to do for them, not just the showmanship that Trump has been seeing showing all summer long.
Steve, how do you see it?
Carly Mania. Carly Mania is taking over this country. I've made this prediction before on Fox, but I'll say it again. I think in 2 weeks she's going to be in first place. I think she will overtake Donald Trump. It's just there's a buzz about her, Maria, all over. And, you know, I've been traveling just the last 3 or 4 days and talking to activists around the country, and they're just enthralled with this woman. They think she's like the next Margaret Thatcher.
Yeah.
It was an incredible performance. The weakness I saw in that debate was there was not enough talk, Maria, about the economy, about jobs, about growth.
I don't understand.
I mean, it was like 10 minutes out of a 3-hour debate.
This is exactly the point that I just made to Senator Lindsey Graham.
You're exactly
right. I mean, this is the number one issue facing the American people, and yet debate after debate and discussion after discussion, I don't hear any questions about how do you get growth in this country and where do you go to get jobs.
The reason that's important, Maria, is, you know, the big statistic that came out this week that was kind of overshadowed by the debate was the Census Bureau came out with these new numbers on what has happened to family income in the last 7 years.
Right.
And under Barack Obama, the average family has lost $1,000 in real purchasing power. That's a statistic that the Democrats had to hammer, and they just didn't because they didn't talk about it.
But please, how about the fact that the Federal Reserve could not even raise interest rates for the first time in almost 10 years by 25 basis points?
Well, because the moderators don't want complicated answers to complicated questions. What they want is a catfight. They got one over a whole host of issues, including Planned Parenthood, which lends itself to much easier answers and much sexier answers than talking about interest rates and the basis point and whatever else you need to talk about. That really is something that you have to explain and explain. It has a lot of nuance, and it just doesn't make for good ratings. And CNN obviously knew that, which is why you saw 3 hours of
Wow.
Fluff.
Well, you can bet that on the Fox Business Network and on my morning show, I'm doing all substance and economic
and the interesting
talk.
is
I don't think
you should have been the moderator.
She will be the moderator. Carly can talk on those issues, and she will basically do very well. There's an old rule in politics, and some guy been around for 5 decades. When momentum catches up with a lack of organization, you get in trouble. So far, there's no organization, there's no money in her campaign. She may do very well in the debates in the future. She may do very well, but she's got to put a structured campaign, and she's got to be prepared for an onslaught, just as she got when she ran for Senate in California.
And we were making this point in the green room. The other big story here, where are the governors? Remember,
right.
6 months ago, everybody's talking about, it's going to be Jeb Bush, it's going to be John Kasich, and who are the 3 front runners? They're the non-governors.
Because the governors have tried to talk about what they did in their states.
Exactly.
And no one cares what they did in their states. And Christie was the biggest example, Walker and all of them. People want to know where are you going to take this country, and the economy is the issue, and nobody's talked about it.
Well, but Christie has a worse narrative. Christie, you brought him up, has a horrible record in his state, so that's not a record he wants to talk about. When he pointed to Trump and Fiorina and essentially said, nobody wants to hear about your backgrounds, I laughed and I said, because you don't want anybody to talk about your record.
Right. No, but it's an interesting development, though, to look at. We had all this promise from the governors. Okay, stay right there, because we want to talk about the other side as well. But first, let's get a look at what's coming up at Media Buzz, top of the hour with Howard Kurtz. Howie, good morning to you.
Hi, good morning, Maria. Donald Trump pushing back at the media over the uproar of his correcting, I should say, that questioner in New Hampshire who called President Obama a Muslim. We'll also look at the extraordinary positive press that Pope Francis gets. He's in Cuba this morning, as you know, heading to the United States. And Fox's Jenna Lee responding to an utterly tasteless joke by Conan O'Brien that likens the women of Fox News to porn stars. Jenna Lee's got a lot to say about that.
Oh, God. Well, we will be there. I'm certainly going to be watching that one, Howie. Thank you so much. We'll see you in about 15 minutes. Hillary Clinton is losing ground to Bernie Sanders. So can she regain that once powerful momentum? Or is the growing uneasiness toward her creating a possible opening for Vice President Joe Biden? We're getting into it with our panel next as we look ahead on Sunday Morning Futures.